Okay, picture this for a second. An army of nearly 90,000 hardened Ottoman soldiers marching confidently into Wallachia, expecting another clean conquest. They were led by Mehmed II, the same Sultan who took down Constantinople like it was nothing. These guys weren't rookies. They'd seen brutality, they dealt it, they lived and breathed war. But what happens when an army like that walks into silence? Not enemy banners, not defenders, not even civilians, just ashes. Burned fields, empty villages that looked like ghosts lived there instead of people. Because Vlad III, Vlad the Impaler, did something no one expected. He lit his own land on fire, destroyed his own food supply, poisoned his own wells. If the Ottomans were going to take Wallachia, they were going to choke on it first. Day after day, the empire marched deeper. But the deeper they went, the more it felt like the land itself wanted them dead. No grain, no livestock, no shelter. Soldiers began to starve, horses collapsed, disease spread. The morale of one of the most powerful armies in the world crumbled without a single traditional battle. And Vlad was just getting started, because beyond the smoke and burned countryside waited something even worse, a message carved in the earth in blood and wood. What Mehmed expected was a decisive campaign. What he found was emptiness. When the Ottoman forces crossed the Danube in the spring of 1462, they didn't enter a country preparing to defend itself. They entered a country preparing to starve them to death. Villages that once held life were nothing but blackened skeletons. Granaries stood hollow. Not even a scrap of wheat left to rot. Wells were filled with earth, carcasses, or poison. Smoke drifted across miles of farmland that would never feed an army again. This wasn't random destruction. This was a military strategy sharpened into cruelty. Vlad knew he could never match Mehmed soldier for soldier. 90,000 men could crush Wallachia in open battle, but they couldn't conquer what they couldn't eat, drink, or trust. Entire populations were moved or wiped out as Vlad retreated inland. Walls of silence replaced maps. No local guide to show roads. No prisoner to spill information. The Ottomans advanced, but every step took them deeper into a dead land that hated them. Chroniclers of the time described soldiers collapsing from hunger before ever seeing a Wallachian blade. Horses ate tree bark. Men fought each other for scraps. And every village burned behind them like the country itself was closing its mouth. This was the kind of war that didn't need battles to kill you, just the soundtrack of wind over ashes.
Starvation weakens an army, but terror breaks it. When Mehmed pushed deeper into Wallachia, expecting resistance at city gates, he instead met a message built from human bodies. The road to Târgoviște, the capital, didn't lead to soldiers, walls, or archers. It led to a forest, not of trees, of stakes. Contemporary accounts describe thousands of bodies raised on sharpened poles. Ottoman soldiers, deserters, scouts, envoys, even Wallachian traitors. They weren't buried. They weren't hidden. They were displayed like architecture, a skyline of the dead. Some sources speak of high-ranking Ottoman diplomats placed at the front, men who refused to remove their turbans before Vlad, choosing religious dignity over obedience. Vlad reportedly replied, "Then let them keep them, nailed to their heads." Whether those exact words were spoken or not, the outcome is well documented. Their turbans were fastened to their skulls with stakes. Their bodies stood at the gates as immovable warnings. No negotiation, no courtesy, only spectacle. Ottoman chroniclers, men loyal to the Sultan, admitted that hardened warriors wept, gagged, or prayed when faced with the sight. Seasoned soldiers who witnessed slaughter in Constantinople now stood frozen, staring into thousands of lifeless eyes. The conquest of Wallachia wasn't blocked by armies. It was blocked by fear. And the deeper the Ottomans marched, the taller the stakes became.
To most rulers, execution is punishment. To Vlad, it was communication. Impalement existed long before him. Ottoman, Persian, Slavic, and even Byzantine forces had used it. But Vlad didn't just use impalement. He engineered it into a system of governance, a visual language,
a policy written not on parchment, but on the bodies of those who defied him. The method was slow by design. A long wooden stake was driven through the lower body and raised upright. The point was often dulled, not sharpened, so the victim did not die quickly. Rows of bodies were arranged by height, by rank, by the message he wanted delivered. A nobleman might hang higher than a soldier. A traitor might be placed at the front, visible to everyone entering the city. Foreign envoys called these displays forests. Not exaggerations. Entire hillsides stood fenced with impaled prisoners. During Mehmed's 1462 campaign, chroniclers like Bonfini and Chalcondyles describe one scene in particular. Roughly 20,000 captives displayed outside Târgoviște. Ottoman troops, already starving and sick from the scorched land, now faced a horizon of bodies, some fresh, others long decayed by sun and rain. Tursun Bey, an Ottoman historian who witnessed it, wrote that the Sultan himself halted, shaken by what he saw. Mehmed had conquered the greatest city in the East, yet here he hesitated. Because how do you fight a man who treats human life as raw material for intimidation? Vlad didn't just kill his enemies, he turned them into monuments. And the message was clear.
But here's where the story takes a sharp turn, the one history books still struggle to explain. During her interrogations, Anne refused to name others who shared her beliefs, not out of fear, but because she would rather suffer alone than drag another's soul to the rack beside her. Officials grew frustrated. A woman, young, educated, unbroken, defying men who commanded kingdoms. She wasn't supposed to think like this. She wasn't supposed to speak like this. And she certainly wasn't supposed to stand her ground when the full weight of Tudor authority pressed down on her. So they escalated. The Tower of London, a place reserved for enemies of the state, became her new prison. Anne was no longer just a troublesome voice. She was now a problem the crown intended to silence permanently. Her resolve didn't crack, not yet. Not even when she was confronted with the one device that few survived long enough to describe, the rack.
The rack was not designed to kill quickly. It was built to unmake a person slowly, joint by joint, inch by inch. Anne was stretched until her shoulders tore from their sockets. Her hips wrenched apart, tendons pulled like ropes under impossible tension. She didn't scream at first. Witnesses said she prayed instead, but no human body can endure a machine built to test the limit of faith itself. By the time her torment ended, she could no longer stand. Her limbs were permanently dislocated. Her bones shifted out of alignment, and every breath came like a blade between her ribs. Even then, broken on the outside but not within, she refused to recant. It wasn't just belief anymore, it was identity. It was defiance carved into flesh and will. The authorities had achieved what they wanted physically, but not spiritually. Anne Askew remained unbroken where they needed her broken most, and so they chose the only fate left for a woman who would rather be torn apart than obey.
They carried her to the stake because she could no longer walk. Her bones had been pulled too far from their natural place, her joints ruined beyond repair. A woman, once sharp-minded and sharp-voiced, was now strapped to the wood like a rag doll, barely holding shape. But the fire was never meant to silence her body. It was meant to silence her ideas. Anne Askew refused to give them that victory. Eyewitnesses wrote that she spoke clearly, even as the flames licked upward. No trembling, no apology, no confession the crown could twist into triumph. They had taken her movement, but they could not take her voice. And in those last burning moments, a woman who had been denied pulpits, denied power, stood higher in history than any man who condemned her. She died unbent. She died unbroken. She died on her own terms. A final act of defiance, not in steel, but in speech. not in survival, but in refusal. Anne Askew's execution was meant to erase her. Instead, it immortalized her.